Wandering soul, wandering mind, wondering what's gone wrong with me, and try not to try. Swayed by the wind, swayed by desire. Can't reach the moon up above, and I don't dare touch the fire. 'Cause the trouble with wanting is I want you. The trouble with wanting is I want you. The trouble with wanting is I want you. And I want you all the time. Always on my mind. Always alone. You could be miles and miles away, but somehow you'll know. If I can't, am I can, and I can't need to. Well, I guess the sound of your voice and the ache it'll just have to do.
All righty, let's get it going. What's going on, everybody? Hey, Jake Smith here. Welcome to Late Night with Jake Smith, where the tech is very average and the host is even more average. Thanks for coming. Thanks for tuning in here. I'm Jake Smith. If you couldn't put that together, we're going to have a great party here tonight. We're super excited to have you joining us, tuning in from all over the place. And for those that have been frequenting, hanging out with us here late at night, you'll notice I kind of got a little setup here today. So I just wanted to share a fun little story about why I have a little setup here today. So my wife, Mackenzie, and I, we have been given the great honor to be hanging out with our little nephew, Oakley, tonight. We're super excited. He's only like 7 months old, so he's just a wee little tot. He's hanging out. He's actually just through the wall over here. Because of that, to make sure that we could keep monitoring him and there's enough light in the room, we actually had to use some of my lamps. We really are low tech over here. We're using some of my lamps to make sure that our constant FaceTime to make sure that he's, it's our pseudo baby camera with my wife's phone and laptop. We're using that piece of tech. In addition, my wife's told me I talk really, really loud. I'm sure that you guys probably know that, especially those that know me, because I talk super, super loud, and because little man's chilling right over through this wall. I got a little mic set up here today. So we're going back to our old school using the Zoom camera here on my computer and using this little setup for us today. So thanks for bearing with us. We're super pumped to have you. We got some cool things in store. We actually have 2 guests today. Yep, that's right. We got 2 folks that are joining us. I can't wait to introduce them later. They have a really cool bio that I have written out. We're really going to amp them up, kind of like WWE. I didn't get their theme songs in time. That's totally okay. Maybe I'll play a little something here on my mix. Anyways, let's jump right on in. I'm Jake Smith. If you don't know me, I really want to get to know you. We're going to use this time. I'm going to share through a couple different segments that we do here at Late Night with Jake to share a bit about me, share a little bit about who I am, what makes me me, and so that you guys can get to know me a little bit better. So, per usual, for those that have been here before, our first segment, it's been a hot one, it's been a cold one. It is what's in the cup, Jake. So this here is my my Yeti. This is a Yeti that I made myself actually. I purchased actually from IKEA and then made myself after that. I'm a DIY guy, So this is my man-made Yeti. And I really enjoyed it. It just keeps cold drinks cold, hot drinks hot. And this week I got a hot drink. This week, featured in What's in the Cup, is a drink that gives you a little piece of affinity from my life. I've talked about these beverages before. I've had a couple of them featured. This here is a glass of tea. Now, I'm usually a coffee guy, but this kind of leads back. I actually started a tea company when I was in college. It was a loose leaf craft tea company. It was called Smithy Tea Co. And we basically made really cool tea boxes, kind of like, gift arrangements that set somebody up for an amazing tea party. And we sold them around the holiday season. It was an incredibly seasonal focus that we did when me and a couple of friends were in college. And we actually started it when we were in a class at the University of St. Thomas. But this here is not one of my personal blends here in my Yeti. This is actually a store-bought. But this store-bought actually has some purpose behind it. So this is Madagascan vanilla. So Madagascan vanilla is pretty much a very straightforward, non-caffeinated tea. Really nothing special, but very flavorful. It's a nice little, soothe late at night. But the story behind this is the first time that I had Madagascan vanilla was actually at a game night. I was playing some board games with some friends. And I remember it. Sometimes you just have things for the first time, and you remember those moments, the flavors, the aromas, things like that. Well, this is no different for me. And in all honesty, it's not that much of a dramatic moment. We remember random things that seem insignificant. Well, me playing games is really an insignificant thing because I love to play games. My whole life, we played board games with my family growing up. I loved to play video games. I wasn't like super into the video games that much, except for my baseball video game where I played numerous seasons as creative player Jake Smith. But any sort of game I've always loved playing, and this is something that I actually want to ask around about into our next section is trying to gauge like what sort of games do you guys play? I learned when I got married that the games that we grew up playing and some of the card games that we grew up playing were not the card games that my wife's family grew up playing. And I'm sure that there's lots of crossover, but for us, that wasn't the case. And so this week, into our next section now, we're going to do Down the Aisle featuring card deck games. Now, Down the Aisle, what this section is, this is coming from two fronts. It's from the married front and the single front. The married front, this is, meant to be something you get to laugh about with your spouse, because we're going to talk about things that generally men fall on one side of the aisle and women fall on the other half. And in general, they're just fun differences to celebrate and see in such a vast picture of God. So they're not meant to be divisive. Don't remember that, or remember that, and don't see these as divisive things to pick into prodded folks. So from the married side, these are fun things to celebrate. My wife and I really want to celebrate because we're very different in a lot of ways, and we're very good at acknowledging that in each other. Well, at least she is for me, and gives me grace when I don't. And then for the single folks, these are your fair warnings, right? These are the things that if you don't know, then you'll know, right? In the words of Big Papa. So that's kind of the two fronts of what Down the Aisle talks about. And this week is card games. So I've learned that the card games that we play, like no one else used to play. The card game that really defines my family, where my family came from. Well, I guess there's two, and those are canasta and dominoes. Those are the two games that we played all the time with my grandparents, whoever, on the Smith side or on my mom's side, which is the Velde side. We always played canasta and we always played dominoes. Those are the two games without fail. Everyone knew how to play. Everyone was always game to play those two games. So those are what we learned to play right away. Well, pretty soon when I started dating my now wife, Mackenzie, when we were in college, I learned that those were games that she herself had never played. So it was really cool. I gotta, I gotta explain this game. But at first I felt like, what? Who are you? How do you not know this game? Right? I just had this, weird, like freak out almost of like, how do you not know these games? Like, do you live under a rock? Right? And of course, I'm hit with this epiphany, like, oh, that's right. Yeah, there's lots of games out there. And I was met with a cool reminder, of my ignorance to react that way, because she asked, "Oh, do you know how to play cribbage?" And I was like, shoot, I know that cribbage is one of the best games in American history. I know that I was given a cribbage board when I was 8 years old, and I couldn't figure it out by reading the directions. I know that cribbage is a game that so many people know how to play. And I also had no idea how to play cribbage, not a clue. And so I had learned kind of on my own to try and, you could say impress her. But she schools me all the time, even in the counting still, and the for whatever reason, I mix all the rules in the games, and cribbage is one that I'm lagging way behind. So I'm super curious to know, like, hey, what games do you got? If you got a game that your family has done, that you personally have, played forever, a certain affinity towards, I want to challenge you to do something with it this week, and I want to challenge that game. Teach someone new that game, because canasta is the number one game that my wife and I play. There's been times that we've played every single night, 7 days a week, that we play one-on-one canasta. Seriously, I would love to challenge you guys. If there's a game that you've played before, I would love to see you guys go out and teach someone how to play it. This, especially in the world that we're in, everyone wants new games, right? And if you can find someone to trade games with, hallelujah to the Lord, right? If you can show someone how to play that game and get a new game from them, phenomenal. And I'd love to see you guys, playing with your roommates, playing with your family, and learning some new game, because frankly, we could all use a little change up now and again in our lockdown state here. So that's my little challenge this week. Now moving on to our next section before getting to our awesome guest. This next section is one that, and getting to learn a little bit more about me, some of my memories, some of, my choices of sippage. Another one of our sections is basically where I'm like, hey, here's where I'm wrong. Here's where I'm not right, and I need to be corrected. And this leads us to our next section, which is the rod of correction. The rod of correction is a super simple section. I'm going to be sharing about something I goofed up. I goofed up big time, small time, all the time. I'm not perfect. And I want to confess that with you guys here. So this week, I was hit hard, and this is, my dramatic impression of a knife of conviction just piercing my heart. And it's something that me and my roommates would do when we're like, dude, I kind of got, I got straightened up. I was really wrong in something, and someone kind of like straightened me up and, told me the hard truth. They, whatever it might be, we'd always go, oh man, I really needed to hear that. Thank you. Right. And use it as like a kind of a transitional response, to not be an emotional response of envy or deceit or anything like that. But I got a knife of conviction this week, and it's from a small group buddy of mine. And the small group buddy, he and I had talked for a couple weeks. We're like, dude, we're just not great at responding to texts. Like we're just not great at, messaging people back like promptly. In fact, my normal rhythm, this is the, the goodness truth here. My honest rhythm is like every 2-3 days, I'll be in the bathroom, and I'll see like, 20, 30 texts that I just got to follow up on. And I'll just rip them all out. I'm like, all right, every 2-3 days, I'm just going to rip them out. Well, my buddy shared this passage with me this week, and it's just a little bit of wisdom from the book of Proverbs. And this is actually going to be our word of encouragement for this week. Usually we do that at the end, but great news, the word of God's coming early. We're going to talk about this verse real quick, but I want to do it in the context of my life, and see if that pours over for anybody else. The verse comes from Proverbs chapter 15, and chapter 15, verse 23 specifically. Super simple verse. It reads, "A man takes joy in giving an answer, and a timely word, how good is that?" Super simple, right? A man takes joy in giving an answer, and a timely word, how good is that? Boy, this gets at two things, right? Both parts of that, they just crush me, and I'm not good at them. And I just wanted to confess those things, because that's an easy area for me to love and care for others in this world. The first piece, a man takes joy in giving an answer. In other translations, they share this same verse saying, a man takes joy in a prompt response. So it actually like brings in a sense of timeliness. It doesn't just say answer, whenever, as long as you give one. It talks about a prompt response. And this is a, knife of conviction for me because I'm even guilty of reading messages, being fully capable to respond, and just putting it off because I have too many of them in the communication channels for work or for emails or whatever, and I just like stockpile them, and for whatever reason, I know that I can be avoiding in conversations as well. I can be avoiding in conversations where I might have an expectation of what we're going to talk about, or if it's an individual that I wasn't looking forward to connecting with, and I come in kind of with this bitterness, this I don't really want to talk to this person, but by golly, I can take joy there, and I hear this as a rod of correction, as just like a dude, like remember this, keep this in mind, and seeing it as an encouragement versus this crazy hammer that's actually pounding down on me. Because it's hard to create joy sometimes from nothing, if you're in a pouty mood. But boy, oh boy, I would love to be challenged in being joyful to give prompt answers. And the second piece, a timely word, how good it is. This is the second piece. Let's get out of my shoes here. The people that we're connecting with, they really value to hear. They really value to hear from good words, good responses, just connection, friendship, etc. And boy, is that true now, right? I'm just aching to get some time, connect with people, be in person, right? See my friends that I haven't seen in so long. Get some actual interaction, and because of all that, man, Zoom gets old, right? Man, FaceTime gets old. I'm so ready for uh, in-person interactions that it gets old. And I just want to encourage everyone with this word that struck me in a different way, and translate this out to all you guys. Continue persevering. I'm sure that people are receiving joy from connecting with you. They're receiving joy from the eighth, ninth, 10th phone call that week, family members, whoever. I really want to encourage you guys of the joy that's on the table there, to be connecting with people, and also that those are good things going forward. Hopefully those are received in good hearts. So would love to encourage you guys this week. That rod of correction really came down to me, and frankly, I not to pat myself on the back too much, but I received some praise from a close friend who had acknowledged, dude, you're doing a great job responding, and it was out of the blue, unprompted. So that was a cool little praise God, and just an encouragement from my perspective, because I've gotten to deepen a relationship because of that. So cheers to that. Hope you guys can enjoy some prompt responses. All right, now enough of the average hosting. We're going to bring on a couple guests that they're really impressive individuals. I'm super excited to have them on. And today we're going to be talking about Christian conduct amidst the coronavirus. And really where this is coming from is this is coming from, we're hearing lots of information in the news. We're hearing lots of information through our sometimes our work outlets, social realms. There's a lot going on. And we do think that there are ways that we can be set apart. There are ways that we can interpret all this. And there's a way that we can, kind of take and store up all these things proactively. And be a light, be a response to the gospel amidst all this time. So this week we have two folks join in. We have Ben Goessling and Bryan Freeman. Ben and Bryan, they've been a part of a Hope Community Church for a little while. We're going to hear a little bit about their story, but I'm super excited to welcome them in here. I'm just hitting my admit button for them to join. So Ben, Bryan, thanks so much for joining us here. I got us all situated for our gallery view. It took me a little bit last week, but we can see your lovely faces. How's it going?
Doing well. How are you, Jake?
Going great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing fantastic. I love the little setups we have. It's always cool seeing the different, the layers that our guests are chiming in from. But I'd love to ask both of you, just give us a little background here real quick. Our guests have been listening to me talk for too long. So let's start with Ben, and then we'll go to Bryan. Share just a little bit, who you are, where you're from, where you're living now, and what you're up to.
Well, like I guess the three of us, I from the South Metro, grew up in the city of Champions, Apple Valley, and Jake's an Apple Valley grad as well, so gotta throw that in there. Went to the University of Minnesota. Have been here most of my life, save for a few years in California as a kid, and worked out in Washington, D.C., covering baseball for about 4 years, 2008 to 2012 or so. So primarily from here, and the thing I do with most of my time, at least from a work perspective, is write about the Vikings for the Star Tribune. So been a reporter for about 15 years, and most of my time has been in what's known as the toy department in newspapers, but spent a little time doing education and business and more kind of general news stuff as well. So that's me primarily. I've got my wife and 2 kids are upstairs, and my cat Cooper is trying to get my attention as well as we do this. So yeah.
Very nice. Well, huge bonus points for your Apple Valley heritage. Go Eagles.
Yeah.
Bryan, on to you.
I was a Wildcat, so City of Champions, except losers to the Egan Wildcats right up the road.
What?
For 2096. We stomped Apple Valley. I don't know. I don't know what you remember, but anyway. So I grew up in Egan, played hockey my whole life. My hockey career actually took me out to Yale for undergrad, which was a cool 4-year experience out there in Connecticut. Definitely they let me in because of the hockey skills, not because of what's up here. Ben definitely has a cooler job than I do in just about every way. I'm a lawyer. Work downtown Minneapolis. I help people resolve disputes. That's the way I put it to my kids. Trike, I always joke that, I don't know if you have seen Trike put the peacemaker wheel up on the screen at Hope, and he talks about, like, in the middle is the healthy way to resolve conflict. So you've got mediation and discussion and sometimes overlooking. And then at the extremes, the really bad part is you've got like murder and assault. And then one click up is litigation, what I do. So that's where I spend, my working days as a lawyer. So that's me. We live in South Minneapolis, not far from Ben, just a few blocks away. I've got 4 little ones under the age of 8, and I'm married to Alicia. So that's me.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome little report here, and some cool background, because you see a lot of perspectives, and also have through that a lot of different outlets that kind of lay the land of the Twin Cities here. So I'm super excited to tap in and hear some of the perspectives that your work has brought about. And obviously we've all been adjusting to this time, and I'm really curious to hear about how that's affected your individual jobs. I know that we can take some guesses as to what that looks like for you guys. But could you just share with us, like, what has been one of the challenges of the past 10 weeks of the COVID-19 situation? What is, I guess, better way to say that? What has affected you, and how is that challenging? Let's start with Ben. Yeah.
All right.
We'll leave with Ben.
Sure. From a work perspective, it hasn't really changed that much. I spend a lot of time working from home this time of year. When the Vikings are in season, I'm out in Egan at their practice facility just about every day. But this time of year, I'm generally at home quite a bit. The thing that has actually probably changed the most is trying to do distance learning with 2 kids. Our oldest, Lydia, is in 2nd grade at Hale Elementary in Minneapolis, and our youngest, Greta, is in the big kids class at Crossroad Preschool. So especially for Lydia, we're kind of trying to take on the education thing too. And Marissa has handled a lot of that, but I'll kind of step in and handle math usually in the afternoon. Marissa does reading and writing stuff in the morning, and I usually do math in the afternoon, as as good journalists do, I guess, that end up with the number side of things. I'm not sure how that works, but yeah, that's been the adjustment, I guess, is trying to add that to it as well, because normally kids are out of the house and working is a little simpler, but that has made things a little more busy that way. I'm typically a high school track coach down in Apple Valley as well, and that's not really going on as much right now, so that slowed things down. But taking on the education piece of things has been a different challenge.
Yeah, I can totally imagine that transferring over to you, Brian, even though you don't quite have the whole gang involved in schools yet. But share with us a little bit. What does this look like for you?
Yeah, it's good. I don't do math, so my wife doesn't let me near the math homework. Not in my repertoire. And most lawyers do not do math well. That's just sort of a lawyer joke. Not so funny, but you hear it all the time.
Most journalists don't either.
Yeah,
So,
right. Well,
good
who
company.
does? I don't know who does. For us, we can do a lot of our work as lawyers remotely, except when you need to get in the courtroom or you need to take depositions and witness testimony. So there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going to happen. Just small example, I've got a jury trial scheduled for 2 weeks in August. Well, we're sort of sitting around thinking, well, how is this going to work? Are courts really going to be getting 12 strangers together, some who, could be older, more vulnerable, and put them in a room for 2 weeks together? Is this going to happen? I have no idea. And my legal work is in the civil realm, so it's largely, this is going to be crass, but it's largely people fighting about money. And those aren't insignificant fights. There's real, like I mostly feel good about what I do every day. But I have wondered, how does this look in like the criminal world where jury trials are hard to pull off right now, and yet there's a constitutional right to a speedy trial. Justice delayed is justice denied. There's some real truth to that. So, that's one area where I would say in my world, we're all still trying to figure it out. There are ways to do a lot of things remotely, but trial, which is sort of like the culmination of a dispute and how it gets resolved, doesn't work so well remote or virtual. And so I think we're all sort of holding our breath, because we can put everything on pause for a while, but at some point, the justice system is pretty essential to a functioning society.
Yeah.
You have to kick up again, and what's that going to look like? We don't really know. The one other thing I would say is that I feel is just the loss of being able to have a cultural impact at my place of work. So, and really what I mean is relationships, like relationships with coworkers, leading teams, getting teams together. It's just only so good on the phone or virtual. And I find myself much more isolated and feeling like I can feel the loss of cohesion on the teams that I work with. And I enjoy that part of my job. I enjoy the team aspect of practicing law. I work with some really crazy, smart, fun, interesting people. So I miss that. I miss, rubbing shoulders and, going out for a happy hour or whatever. So I feel that loss for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, by golly, it's hard to think, even the introverts out there in the world, like, I'm sure that they're having a tough time, like, let alone the extroverts. My sister did tell me something really interesting, which was, my sister's an introvert, and she said, however weird you as an extrovert feel now is how weird I feel as an introvert normally. Wow. Wow, praise God right now that that I don't have to experience it that way. And however much truth there is to that is is up for debate. But amidst like seeking truth, I'd love to hear from some of your perspectives, because we're hearing lots of different different ways that we should be adjusting our lives, and some of them, you're right, talking about that meter, some of them do really fall towards the it's panic mode. It's time to all the decisions you've been waiting to make, you have to make them, kind of just this panic mode. And then on the other, you can really not experience that. You can feel this is going to blow over very quick. And I personally know people almost on the extremes that are incredibly worried, and some that are not as worried. And I'd love to ask both of you. We'll go in reverse order. We'll start with Bryan and then to Ben. How has your interaction with kind of these two extremes, in both a familial, career, and a ministry setting, what does that look like? And walking that tense line, because it's something that I think we're all looking to hear some advice around.
Yeah, that's a good question. In this whole, I feel like there's just an avalanche of information coming at us. The amount of articles, tweets, social media posts, news articles that we're inundated with is overwhelming. And I think my instincts, I feel like the Lord has been saying, like, slow down, be slow to speak, quick to hear, slow to anger, slow to extreme emotion. I think there's a verse in James that roughly follows those ideas: slow to speak, quick to hear, slow to anger.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel over the last week, as we've had conversations with really good friends that have gotten pretty heated, that's what I feel like the Lord is saying. And some of that, I think, plays into the very simple fact that He is in control and God is sovereign, and none of this surprises Him, and we are not omniscient. And I don't know. So that's sort of a rambling answer, but I feel like the Lord pressing in to say, like, slow down your thoughts, slow down your judgments, carefully consider. The other thing that comes to mind for me, and then I'll flip it to Ben, is just a search for empathy in talking to people who are at the extremes, maybe. So for me, that's trying to understand, like, where does the panic come from? Where does the frustration come from? Where does the anger come from? It's probably coming from a totally legit value, whether it's, I think it's so important that everybody be healthy and protected and safe. Like, God is so about that value. Or job loss is tragic, economic, train wreck. Oh, like, I think God grieves that. He wants us all to be working. That's part of what He made us to do, is to work as people, to be productive. So, like, God grieves that too. And so I think on both ends of the spectrum, like, their people are sort of attached to something that God cares a lot about. But when it gets real extreme, I start to want to ask, like, okay, how much are we worshiping these things? How much are they becoming idols? But I think that piece of empathy is important. And when you're in these discussions, like, really trying to understand where's the person on the other side of the table coming from? What are they crying out for in their heart? What are they thinking about in their mind that they're clinging to? I think that's a really good practice, just trying to get your mind around empathy, and trying to crawl into their mind and heart a bit.
Yeah, that phenomenal. It makes me think, just before you get going, Ben, makes me think of our OG first episode guest, Stan Oster, in his wise words, in marriage class, talks about sit on the same side of the table and then talk about what's on the table. And it's super important, right, to be seeing the different perspectives. But I think that pours over in a lot of ways, because unrest and tempers can really add up more emotions than we expect. And I know that my wife's done a great job seeing that in me, and like, wow, that seemed like an emotional response, Jake. How are you really feeling, right? And some of those things are really good. And being slow. You're right on the James reference there. Being slow to anger and quick to listen is vital now. Love that. Ben, go ahead. I know that you wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, I mean, the point about empathy, I think, is important, because a lot of our discussions on this play out frankly, on social media. At least you see that anytime you go on your social media feed, somebody has a certain point on this, and it becomes this kind of back and forth that I think sometimes we do that out of convenience because it's a very easy way to connect with people and have a conversation, however shallow that may be. But especially on something, I mean, we can get riled up about a lot of things. We can get riled up about politics and things that are going on in Washington all the time. But this, I think, has a different tenor to it because it affects us personally. There is an element of fear involved in all of this. Am I going to lose my job? What if I get sick? What happens to my family? All of this stuff is feeding into it. And I think when we have conversations with brothers and sisters in Christ on social media, it tends not to be as much about empathy and listening as it tends to be about, not always. I mean, there could be good conversations there too, but the medium, I think, tends to lend itself to dunking on people. And when we have more time, when we have the ability, I think, to be home a little more often, to pick up the phone, to have a one-on-one conversation in some of the time that we don't feel like we normally have, let's use that. Let's get back to some of those more personal ways of communicating, saying, hey man, I saw you posted about this. Obviously it's something that is on your mind a lot. Can we talk about it? What are you feeling? How is that landing with you, rather than, firing off the quick post on social media? And there can be value in that too. But I think the instinct we have a lot of times is to make a point and then kind of check out of the conversation. And I think the other thing, we have seen it at the Star Tribune in terms of people, there goes my cat, interacting with what we're doing, probably on a scale that our traffic numbers have hit levels that we have not seen ever. Usually the thing that spikes it the most is the Vikings, but coronavirus has done that even more. And I think a lot of newspapers have experienced that. And there's good to that. There's certainly an element of my job that I believe is about informing people and giving people accurate information and all of that. But I found it myself, where if you spend all day reading what's going on, and I tend to be sort of a super consumer of news just because it's an occupational hazard, but it leads you to a perspective that is very focused on the here and now and the divisions among human beings in terms of what the problem is, whose fault it is, what the solution is going to be. It's very easy to look at that and get pulled out of a view of this that takes into account the fact that God is eternal, that God is not surprised by this, that things like this have happened before in history. I mean, we keep using the word unprecedented. This is not unprecedented. We have had major pandemics, things like this in human history before, and we have come out of them in different places, obviously, but this is not the first time we've ever gone through this. So I think pulling back the lens and trying to view it on a less here and now and maybe more of a long-term scale has been helpful for me. We've been going through the Psalms as part of the Hope Devotional, and Psalm 37 this week really, it was probably even a week and a half ago now, that stuck with me basically since then. It just talks a lot about just the theme is that eventually this will end. Eventually God will vanquish enemies and have victory, and all of this stuff is going to pass. And I think taking that viewpoint of it can be really tough in all of this, especially as things change so fast. Every single day there's something going on with it. But the more we can kind of balance the short-term view and the long-term view, at least for me, I think that's been helpful.
Yeah, super good. And I think right on that point, Ben, about this too shall pass. And of course, I want to roll my eyes there, because it's like, yes, something that maybe we hear beat into us, and hope can numb us sometimes, right? It can be something that we don't remember to hold tightly to. So I kind of in light of that and responding and rejecting that passivity, to just we're just going to ride it out. I'd love to ask about, like, as far as, we're speaking here to the Christian men community, at Hope community, and hopefully that's a piece of, all of the Twin Cities men. But starting with this niche that we are here, I'd love to ask you guys about what are ways that we can, not see this as something we're just laboring through, but see it as a time of gardening, right? See it as a time of watering, as a time of, rather than just we'll wait it out and just kind of grind. Well, frankly, a fifth way through the year, has been we'll grind it out and just wait. And we learned this last Sunday, what a joy it is to be waiting for even over decades, right? And dealing with pain for such long periods of time. And that's so true, but not to say, but and on top of that truth of, the power of waiting and patience, what are some things that you guys are seeing that that the men of hope, that Christian men across the world can be doing in this time for the kingdom?
Good question. I would say first, just want to acknowledge that feeling of like wanting to isolate, I think, is totally real and legitimate. And it took me at least a week and a half of COVID world being upon us to really feel like energized again and try to see some vision beyond my own individual circumstances. So I think it's totally legitimate to feel this pull towards isolation. I think the question I would want us to ask is, like, how do we want the church to be seen? What is God's vision for the Big C church, the community of believers that are supposed to reflect who Jesus is to the world in this time? Like, what do we want to be known for? This is a crazy opportunity to show the love of Jesus to the world, to our neighbors, to our kids, because circumstances are hard, circumstances are different. Like, I feel like it's this moment to be countercultural, and I really want the church to capture this, see this moment as an opportunity, not as something that's just like, oh, this makes my life worse, this makes my family's life worse, this makes my job worse. No, this is a great opportunity for the capital C church. Ben says this is not unprecedented. Like, there's really awesome historical records that have been passed down from early plagues, where, like, the one I think of is the emperor who had the fortunate name of Julian the Apostate, because I think he was like the last pagan emperor before Constantine, maybe. But we have records of his writings where he's trying to explain, like, how the heck did the church take off? This makes no sense to me? And his explanation that we have come down in history, more than 1,500 years later, is the church took care of their own and the rest of us in the midst of horrendous plague. And so there was like this self-sacrificial, Jesus imaging conduct ethic going on in the early church in a way that was beautiful. And God used that, and Christianity caught fire. Like, I know that's not exactly our circumstance, but what if we envisioned this moment as that kind of moment, as that kind of opportunity? And it's really hard because the whole, like, everybody's telling us to stay home, stay isolated. And that is, I think, part of what it means to sacrifice, is to sacrifice what I'd really like to be doing, which is going any number of which ways and spreading, and so it's really hard in our context to know what that looks like. But I so want the church to see it as an opportunity to have unity, to lay down preference, to hold up hope in a way that is beyond the material and the physical and the now and into the eternal. I mean, this is an opportunity for the church, and I think it's not going away. Like, there's going to be lots more opportunity, I think, unfortunately, or fortunately for us. So I'll stop there, flip it to Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that comes to mind a little bit, and we've seen this progression a little bit now. When we first started doing this, it was kind of not excitement, but there was novelty to it of, hey, we're all at home and let's see what this is like. And now we're sort of, this feels, I think the example I've used with some of the kids I coach too is this is like the middle mile of a race where it's not new enough to be exciting anymore, but we're not close enough to the end of it that you have that extra burst of energy, say I can kick and get to the finish. This is, I mean, even the middle mile implies that we know when it's going to end. We don't. So some of this is, I think, Romans 5 comes to my mind a lot with this, where Paul talks about we rejoice in our sufferings because sufferings produce endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame. We have to, I think, have a spirit of endurance and a spirit of hope in this and not get discouraged when this continues to go on or let things don't go back to normal the way that we would like them to do. I think it's a matter of being, I mean, Bryan used the word opportunity a lot. I've heard Trike say that a lot with this, that there's an opportunity to this to model Jesus in a way that may be different. I mean, you see that whether it's been different faces on Hope's Facebook Live stuff on Sunday mornings, or even in things I've read about people taking more of an interest in spiritual things because of all this going on. And I remember that after 9/11 too. There was a stretch where that after that happened, people were kind of asking bigger questions and a little more willing to have those conversations than they would have before. And some of this, I mean, I'll go out for runs sometimes and people kind of look at you. I mean, even smiling and waving at somebody seems like people kind of look at you like, if you smile too much, you're going to give me COVID or something. And there's an element of fear and there's an element of uncertainty that is driving a lot of this. And what would it look like for the church to respond to that and say, our hope is in something else, and we have endurance because we are aiming at a God who is sovereign and I believe is going to work this for good. I don't think that God is going to leave this undone in the sense that he won't sow some outcome that glorifies him and is ultimately for our benefit because of it. So a lot of it, I think, is keeping the long view and keeping your eyes open for how can I be a neighbor? Who in my life can I check in with because I have a little more time? There's a little bit less, I think, of this is probably for the millennials out there. I think I'm technically a millennial, but just barely. I feel like there's less FOMO because it's not, I need to be out at 10 other things, and if I go to this, I can't be in this other place at the same time. That you can connect with people. It's not perfect. The online ways to connect with people they're not as good as being there, but you can be in more places at once and connect with more people without having to commute or do all those different things. So be alert for those opportunities and look for ways to care for people in your life, especially in the coming months when this is going to get very old for people. I think there's an opportunity there to continue to endure and to serve people through that. Yeah,
man, did we script this or what? I mean, where I wanted to take this next was is right in that last point, Ben. This is great. So I was going to say that the world has gotten a whole lot smaller and a whole lot bigger at the same time. And I mean that in several senses. Huge upsides to, just availability to connect with people everywhere, right? And everyone's online. We have to be, so we can, in a lot of ways, we are connecting more than we ever were. But at the same time, right, it is really, the gold is refining very quick, and we're scraping impurities off the top in the sense of who are these essential relationships in our life. And one of the things that you guys did talk about, which I want everyone that's listening to be able to hear this, you should be taking care of you. It is good to take care of you. And it is good to take care of those that are close to you, as well as going on to take care of others. But there is a beauty in the sacrifice of those things. And I think that really weaves together with some of our conversation early on around idols and seeing weird idols that we may not have never known slipping in, and starting to take, hold of time and relationships. But where I want to direct this to you, Ben, and to you, Bryan, is talk to us a little bit about, as the world's getting smaller. I think that that's a really, really important piece to this. As we're experiencing COVID-19, making our world smaller, to both single men that are tuning in, and to married men, what are things that we need to keep front of mind when we see our world getting smaller, and making sure that we're caring for the world getting smaller? And one of the agenda items that I have behind this, that's something front of mind for me, is how evangelism is taking place today and what evangelism looks like. There's a lot of strong understanding in reaching the millennials of today, and reaching myself. I'm actually a year out of the millennial bracket. So reaching
Gen Z.
I'm Gen Z, right? Reaching the next couple generations. There's so much relational capital that has to be laid nowadays, especially here in America. So coming from one of those angles, let's start with single men, and then we can talk about married men. What are some things that you guys would encourage us with?
I think in terms of singleness right now, I mean, loneliness is paramount. I think whether you have roommates or whether you don't, there's an element of I'm missing something. I'm missing the way my life is typically structured. It's different when the people I see the most and the people I'm closest to live in my house. I mean, that's different for me as a married dad than it would be for a single guy. And I think a lot of it comes down to, I guess, understanding that you're going to be experiencing some of that loneliness, and that it's okay to ask for help with that. It's okay to look for places to connect with guys, and don't, I guess, push that to the back. If you're feeling those emotions, it probably means that it's not that you're weird. It probably means that odds are a lot of other people are feeling that same way, and trying to connect with people on a level that you can help each other get through that, I think is good for yourself, but also probably an opportunity to build relationships and an opportunity to serve people as we go through this. And for married guys, it's it's interesting, because I think in our house, my wife has stayed home with our kids for 8 years, and I've been the one. She had a career before we had kids, and has laid that down for at least the time being, and it has slowed time down. And I typically am pretty busy with my job. I have a crazy job, and I'm somebody that likes to be busy, but it has allowed me to have time to spend with my kids that I wouldn't have had normally. And I think that has been that's been the gift of this. I think is just the gift of time. I don't know how many days where I say to my wife, man, if I had 26 hours in a day, things would be so much easier. But you don't have that now, but you do, in the sense that you don't have a commute anymore. You don't have probably quite as many things knocking on your door. So time is a precious commodity. And the fact that we have a little more of it now, I've noticed that with myself. It's just like, I find myself a lot of days just saying, God, thank you for the gift of time through this. So seeing that as a blessing in the midst of this, I think it's been helpful.
Oh, this is a good question. I sort of lay my cards down. I think in the church we put people in categories too much. I mean, what is the difference between singleness and being married? It's significant, but in one sense, it's your community looks different, right? So as a married dude, I have community with my wife. I live with my wife, and it's more than that. I'm not saying that that's it, but I hope we can. I want us to get away from that distinguisher, as though it's a big distinguisher, in the sense that you know, Jesus was the most human person there ever was, and the dude was single.
Mhm.
But what comes to my mind for me is just the fact that community is going to look different for dudes who are single and dudes who are married, probably. Especially insofar as community happens in a marriage in a way that's there, it's in the same place. It's a lot easier. So, um, to Ben's point, I think, you know, I don't want to put it on people who are struggling to, like, it's your problem, you should reach out, because I think there's plenty of dudes in our ministry at Hope, leaders who would love to connect, and it goes both ways. Like we want to be more intentional about reaching out to you all, and I think some of that is happening. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask. Like, I'd love to do a Zoom call or a check-in or whatever with anyone who wants to shoot the bull about baseball or the news or you know, books,
Well,
whatever. I think so. I think sometimes when we're struggling, at just asking and letting somebody else know you're struggling is a huge, hard, courageous step, but super important, right? Like, and it's okay. There's millions of people, millions
yeah.
of us struggling, people who feel alone in a marriage or not in a marriage, right? Like, there are weeks, I confess, I feel alone in my marriage. That's not my wife's fault. That's our, you know, problem on the table to deal with side by side. Um, but I don't think it's a problem unique to single dudes either. So that was a totally random answer, but I think ask for help, and and I think, you know, realize we're all made for community. We're made to have other brothers and sisters in the right context, as friends, as gospel friends, to encourage, to laugh, to have fun. Like, that can still happen. That's super important. So don't neglect it.
Mm, mm. Yeah, super good. Not completely random. I thought that those did a good job because in a lot of ways, right, we have different nests, and those nests that we have been given to steward, they look very different, and marriage shouldn't be a, you know, a neglecting factor, you know, of individuals that are involved there. That was something really cool for me to hear too, of you know, things that have existed in relationships that have been present before continue to be. And I hope that that's the case. And, you know, you put it very well, Bryan, of what our gospel community looks like as brothers and sisters here. Like, what a gift to, you know, to be able to experience that, and on a large body to do that. I think that the church is not just corporate on Sundays, which is another cool factor to be sharing about. So thank you so much for chatting and giving honest responses to my tough questions. We got a couple more minutes, and I'd love to end here on a chipper note. And can you guys share a story from the past 10 weeks from COVID-19? What has been the most fun surprise in all this? It could be a fun story that you've had with you and your family. It could be a fun thing that you saw someone doing, or, you know, just something from the internet. But I'd love to hear, you know, what is something that comes to mind when we're 80 something down the road and our grandkids, Lord willing, may whatever, some little kid asks you, what was it like? Was it boring or was it fun? What are the fun stories that you're excited to share way down the road?
Oh man, so I can go first real quick. Two come to mind. Number one, when COVID really hit, like, the world started to change, and it happened really fast. I don't know if you all remember that. It went from, like, we're not letting people into our country from China to, and then it just started to ratchet up. My family and I were in Puerto Rico on a vacation. We haven't been on a vacation together in, like, you know, 2 years. My wife's been pregnant for the last. Anyway, okay. But so we're finally on vacation, and it's like day 3. We take 4 kids under the age of 8 on a plane for like 9 hours. We get to Puerto Rico. It's phenomenal. It is so beautiful. The beaches are so beautiful. And at the end of day 3, the governor issues like the most strict quarantine, stay at home, you're not allowed outside order ever. And like our Airbnb is 20 yards, no kidding, from the beach. We can see it, like it's there. It's like so tempting, such a tease. What a tease. And we're locked inside for like 2 days before we can fly out. So, and our Airbnb was nice, but it wasn't like this, we were there for the beach, right? So we didn't really care what kind of, so it was not exactly a great situation to be with, 6 people and 4 kids under 8 and a baby who's, I think Etta was under a year at that point. So it was sort of this like, what a crazy deal. Like I can see the beach, it's right there. I will always remember that aspect of it for us. The other thing I think I'm going to remember this season for is the Last Dance.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody, like, I'd be curious. We could do a whole session on The Last Dance and sports, but the documentary ESPN has on the Bulls and Michael Jordan is just phenomenal, and I'm so hooked. He is such a, I grew up watching him play on TV and was not a basketball guy, but Michael Jordan captivated me. To see who he is as a person and his story and what a competitor he is so compelling to me. So in some weird way, I think I will always remember like becoming really engrossed and immersed into that story and the Last Dance ESPN documentary. So those are my
those are real good.
I remember.
Honestly went right over my head right away. I was like, Last Dance. What is The Last Dance?
Oh, you got to check it out, Jake.
Have you watched
check it out. No, nothing.
It's really good.
Nothing at all. But Ben, how about you? What's your fun story you can't wait to share?
Well, okay, so one of them happened. Well, actually, Bryan, do you mind if I share the one that relates to your family?
You can share whatever you want, Ben.
My younger daughter Greta and Bryan's son Judah have become very good friends, and they joke. I'm not sure how much of a joke it is anymore. They have started planning their wedding. So
Judah's 4. He just turned 4.
Greta's
how old?
About 5.5. Well, not quite 5.5, but so we get a letter.
By the way, can I say real quick, Ben? Like I'm totally okay. I think I'm gonna win the brother-in-law. Or will you be my brother-in-law? I don't know. I'll win the lottery if they get married. Like
that'd be great.
I'm not exactly resisting this.
No, it'd be awesome. So Greta gets a letter pretty early in this from Judah, and I'm assuming he had help writing all of this, but it basically said, Greta, I want to marry you. First I think he asked if they could have a play date soon, and then proposed and asked if
first things first, right? I've taught him well. You gotta take the right steps.
It's a courtship, I guess, but he asked he said, ask your dad if he will be my groomsman, and ask your sister if she will be your bridesmaid. So he's planning the wedding. I mean, really, in terms of intentionality and a dude getting involved in wedding planning, it's pretty good. I mean, so he sends this letter, and it's been next to Greta's bed ever since. And I think there was another one maybe with another marriage proposal, that basically all of Judah's notes are hung up around our house, and Greta sleeps next to one of them every night. And I mean, the other one, I guess, is my older daughter Lydia turned 8 on April 26th, so about a week and a half ago, and we had kind of an impromptu thing. We planned for people to just kind of drive by and drop off gifts and not really stay around, because you're not really supposed to, but people get out of their cars and everybody's within, it keeps 8 to 10 feet apart, but people just wanted to hang out. And it was kind of this powerful reminder of, I think we spend a lot of time in our normal lives just like, oh man, I'm so stressed. I have so many things going on. This is such a pain. And I do it. I mean, the job I have is the job I wanted when I was 15. It's my dream job. And there's times where it's like, I hate this. And, I do that. And I love coaching the kids I coach at Apple Valley, but there's times where it's just like, man, this is stressful. I have all this stuff going on in my life. And it was a reminder, I think, of the things that we take for granted normally are things that we need to approach differently once this is over. We need to realize that the normal things in our lives, once they're taken away, are things we miss and things we value. And we basically ended up people hanging out in our front yard for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then a big rainstorm came in and people just waited out in their cars to stay around a little longer once the storm blew through. And so, I realized a couple of days later, we posted pictures of this on Facebook. I said to my wife, like, this was probably illegal. I mean, we were violating the shelter in place order, I guess, in some ways, to not have, the non-essential travel thing or whatever. But that whole thing of people coming by, and my parents had this like big inflatable swan hanging out of the moonroof of their car and decorated it. I mean, just kind of this crazy party. And I think, Bryan, you guys did something a couple days later for Judah for his birthday. But just kind of those moments that are not ordinary, I think will be memorable and will help us appreciate, hopefully, the things that are ordinary and the things we often take for granted. So, I mean, those are the two that kind of stick out to me.
So good. Yeah, man, those are fun. I never would have guessed proposals were increasing at this time with all that. We just got our change the date from some friends. Same photos, they're save the date, just they drew on little masks for themselves for their new wedding date. Super cool. Thanks so much for sharing about that. And thank you so much for joining us here today. We're actually, for the first time ever, we're gonna co-sign off, which will be fun. We haven't had that together. So we're gonna co-sign off. This was awesome. Time just flew by here. Crazy that we crossed it over an hour there. Thanks so much for coming on, dudes. And please, those tuning in, hit these guys up. They're super interesting men to pick their brains on. They've got plenty more stories. I know I've gotten to hear from both of them quite a bit. So please pick their brains, reach out and connect. We're super excited to have you tuning in here, and hope it's the start of great new relationships. So thanks.
Catch up on The Last Dance. We'll do a recap episode.
There we go. Yeah. We should do we'll do a Men of Hope series on The Last Dance.
Jordan is better than LeBron, kids.
There we go. Yeah. We'll just do strict hot topics for an entire hour and just talk about debates. Yeah, just throwing gas on fire. And we'll work on conflict resolution. Bryan, you should show up and lead us in that.
All right.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thanks again. We'll see you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jake.